everybody. I'm Karrina Ferris, Miss Nevada, and welcome back to the Inform to Reform podcast. Today we have Teresa Benitez-Thompson with us, and I'll let her give you a little bit of information about herself before we get started.
Well, first of all, I'm so excited to see you as our Miss Nevada. Congratulations, yes. Congratulations. I'm Teresa Benitez-Thompson, and I presently, my day job, I serve as Chief of Staff to Attorney General Ford here in the state of Nevada, and I self-identify as a recovering elected because I termed out of 12 years of service at the Nevada State Assembly. First elected in 2010, served my first session in 2011, and then was exited out per the Nevada Constitution after 12 years of service. So my last session was 2021 session.
2021.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes, I interned at the legislature in 2023. Right after you had termed out, and
yes.
So I was a little disappointed you had termed out before I was an intern, but it ended up working out because I interned with Nicole Cannizzaro, who is amazing in her own right, so it's great.
Absolutely.
So we'll get started. Oh, also Teresa is a former Miss Nevada, so we have one of the Miss Nevada sisters here with us today. Just a fun little tad bit of information for you all. So where are you from, and what sort of influenced you to get into this political world and to run for office?
So I'm from Reno, originally born in Ventura, California, but by the age of 4, my family had left Southern California and was firmly planted up here in Northern Nevada. I've called myself mostly a Northwest Reno kid because I think I lived the majority of my life within the 5 miles of Northwest Reno. Mamie Tolles Elementary School, Clayton Middle School, McQueen High School, TMCC, and then over to UNR. So I'm an alumni of our local community college and our university. Decided to venture out and go to grad school at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Yeah, and
being one of my law school options for
beautiful law school. So I'm a social worker by profession and got my master's degree in social work, and the social work school is right next to the law school there on campus. So I walked through the quad a lot because it was easier and a little cut through to get to my school, which was was adjacent to it right there. So it's a beautiful campus. The one thing I'll say is a Westerner though, so obviously we don't get rain here a lot. And when we do, it lasts for 10 minutes and then you're dry, right? So my first day there in Michigan, it started to rain and I was walking to campus, about a mile walk for me. And I was like, it's gonna stop raining in a minute. It didn't stop raining all day.
Oh, no.
And so I went to my first class completely drowning, soaked wet. And I bought an umbrella. First time buying an umbrella that day.
You need it that day, for sure. So in addition to that, for your political career, working as a social worker, what made you consider that transition from social work into politics?
Well, I always knew at my base that I wanted to be involved in community change, and my roots were actually in grassroots organizing. So in high school, my sister, who's about a year younger than me, just a shy year younger than me, had a baby at the completion of the end of her freshman year of high school. So his name was Andrew. He just turned 30 this year, but he was born on my 16th birthday.
Oh, wow.
My sister stayed in school, graduated with a great GPA while being a mom, but it was a really tough go. And our family had to use public assistance in order to make it through, and the economics were really hard, kind of making sure that we could stretch a penny, make a penny sing, get things paid. Became a family effort at that point because my mom was a waitress. So we got involved in an organization that was advocating for low-income women to have more say and involvement in the welfare policies that were supporting their lives. And specifically what we were advocating for was that the requirement to work while you're on welfare, that education could be counted as work, so that my sister wouldn't have to be forced out of options like staying in high school or going to college or going to community college to get a job, that education is more valuable than work and a better investment of time than work. So we were advocating for an educational component to be allowed. We eventually did win that, took some national change, but I knew right then, this is what I want to do. I want to make policies make more sense for the people who are supposed to be benefiting from them. I want the public policy, the value statement you have behind our programs to match what's happening when they're administered and when they're implemented. So I knew I wanted to do that. I just wasn't sure how to get there. During the process of doing that low-income advocacy work, there were a handful of elected legislators who would take meetings with us, pay attention with us, pay attention to what we were saying, and work with us to create the changes we needed in Nevada statute to make it happen. And I wanted to be one of them. I'm like, I see them listening to us, I see them hearing us, I see them working with us. That's what I want to do. I want to be one of those people who's going to sit there and listen and make these changes to make our community better. So that's how I knew that at some point I would want to run for office. I knew I wanted to be a social worker because I looked around and the people I admired most who were doing this work were social workers. And so I was like, well, that's a thing. I want to do that. That's how the two
transition, the world's
diverged.
Collided.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. So what year did you run for office? I know you briefly mentioned it earlier, but we can revisit that real quickly. What year did you run? And then what year did you become majority leader?
So my first election was in 2010. I actually considered running the cycle before in 2008. And actually deciding not to run was probably one of the best decisions I made. I was just getting established with my first professional job as a social worker. I was engaged to at the time to my husband, and I realized like I needed to do some personal foundation work before I got carried away into the elected world, and it's all consuming, right? It is all consuming. So I just felt like I wasn't going to be like well-rounded if I went down that path too far. And I think one thing I knew from the years of being involved in the scholarship program is well-roundedness, right? There's always that theme about being well-rounded and trying to be balanced, and within all of that, having inner peace. So decided not to do anything in 2008. 2010, absolutely knew I was going to run. The person who held the assembly seat that I lived in was hitting term limits herself, so she had to exit. So my class that I came in 2010 for the 2011 session was the first class of legislators who were rolling in after term limits. So you saw a lot of legacy legislators who had been serving, some for 15 years, some for 20, 30 years, exit.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
that's
exit, and then a new group of us came in.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Yeah. I did not know that we didn't have term limits until
they hit in.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. So those term limits are 12 years now.
They're
for
12
our
years.
Senate and our Assembly?
Yeah. It's 12 years for the constitutional offices already have 8, right? You can serve 2 terms for 8 for constitutional offices, but then all other elected offices are 12.
12. Okay, very interesting. So on a national field right now, we're sort of seeing a push for those term limits. And so do you think that those term limits would be beneficial at a federal level or mainly at that state level?
Yeah, I am a supporter of term limits. People, and I've been a supporter since I went in. This is just my personal purview that, and I won't speak to the number. I don't know that if 12 is the right number. I know that throughout the United States you see term limits in different increments of time. But at least in 2010 when my class came in, and I think it's a good example of the benefits that can come when you have term limits, is we got elected the first women of color to the state legislature.
Oh, wow.
There were 4 of us Latinas that came in that cohort elected to the assembly. Now Senator Dina Neal, then Assemblywoman Dina Neal, first African American woman in the assembly. We'd already had one in the Senate with Senator Bernice Martin Matthews, of course. And you also saw the demographic change in terms of age. We were, we shifted the whole average lower because a lot of working professionals came in, a lot of people in the middle of like hands-on parenting of young children coming in. So we just changed the composite and the demographic and the body of the legislature. I think and that changes your perspective on a number of different issues, right? So I thought it was really beneficial because I thought that the legislature started to reflect more the population of the state.
In Nevada.
So I think there's benefits to them. I think they make a good. I think there's a case for how they are beneficial.
I agree with that. And so what year did you become majority leader, and what differences did you see as majority leader versus as just being an assemblywoman?
Yeah, so in the Assembly for Majority Leadership came to me for the 2017 session. After the 2015 session, the party that I was a member of was not in charge, and then my party regained control, the majority in the legislature in the 2016 election. So we knew we were going to be leadership in the 2017 election. Jason Frierson, who's now the United States Attorney, Frierson, but he became Speaker Frierson. And with the assembly process, the speaker gets to appoint their majority leader. So he selected me as his majority leader. In return, I had the great honor of being able to nominate him as Speaker of the Assembly. And with that, a historic moment in nominating, and then by acclamation, voting for the first African American speaker in the Nevada in the Nevada Assembly. So I think for me that was the most special of the moments. I was like, yeah, I get to be a majority leader, but more importantly, I get to nominate Speaker Frierson to this position, and how exciting that was. Yes. So that was a 2017 session. And you, per the rules of the assembly, you serve as majority leader and through the entire year, or through the entire biennium. And so we had some special sessions then too, served as majority leader, but then was also majority leader for the 19 and the 21 session. So 3 sessions total, spanning 6 years.
Awesome. So what were some key policy that you guys were focused on during your years as majority leader, and what role did you play in those specific policies that were passed?
The issues that were most important to us, we passed a lot of great reforms around elections. We passed reforms around allowing mail-in ballots and just creating greater access to the ballot and ease of access to the ballot. So we had a package of legislations and bills that did that. That to me was very important. I'm a student of political science, my undergrad degree, political science, and so to me how the electorate behaves and how the electorate has, how we the people have access to our constitutional right to vote is very important, and it shouldn't be impeded or any way. Free, open, fair elections. So we made a lot of headway in towards making sure that it's as accommodating as we can to vote, and really enjoyed working on that legislation. Also worked on legislation to create the school social work program. Oh, wow. And that came out of conversations following very tragic school shooting at one of our middle schools in which people lost their lives, students and teacher. There was a report that was commissioned and done by the then Attorney General Laxalt to look at an after incident report and to look at what happened and what those faults were. One of the things that I noticed about that report is that lots of people acknowledged they had a student that was troubled. And you kind of see that as a theme in other places as well. That's not unique to Nevada. But the thought at that time was, well, we just need to train teachers to kind of know how to work with students who are troubled better. And I went to a conference, and they were trying to. What I realized is they were trying in some ways to teach teachers to be social workers. Like, here's how you do a home visit. You've got to go to the parent's home, and here's how you recognize how family systems work, and here's how these interpersonal dynamics can impact students. And I was like, this is kind of silly. We don't need teachers to be social workers. Yeah. We need social workers to be social workers, and we need teachers to be teachers. Then we need them to be in the classroom. So worked on a bill to establish social workers in schools program, and create within statute an ideal ratio that the state ought to work towards. At that time, there were 8 social workers statewide funded by a grant, and with the help of Governor Sandoval took a big lead on the funding side of it. But then we got, I think it was $22 million of the biennium, $11 in each year, to fund social workers in the schools. And now it's a big established program. School of Social Work was so great to work with us to establish a certificate program for social workers that wanted to do this kind of work. So I felt like that was a big lift and a big change that I got to be a part of as well.
Well, that's incredible. So what sort of differences in the role itself did you find between, again, like just assemblywoman versus majority leader? Were there different, I guess, people who came to you? What was the process? Was it a little bit different in those two different roles for you?
Yeah, so the majority leader's floor, or the floor majority leader's job is to make sure that the bills are coming out of committee in a timely way, and you're passing the bills on the floor, and that you know what your votes are going to be, you know what's going to pass, you get that passed, you know what the problems are for bills that might be struggling to get the number of votes they need to prevail, and then holding back that legislation just long enough to give it time to work itself out, see if it's going to rise or fall. And then if it rises, get it passed. But really, you've got a big clock over your head. In the Nevada Legislature, there's 120 days per the Constitution that you're in session. You can roll into special session, but only specific items that are named in the can be addressed at special session. So you're on a clock to get everything passed and out of your house, through the other house and back, and through all the ministerial processes that are in place as well, to just simply move paper around and make sure that you're tracking it correctly. So it's very much a management position in a way, I would say. I always looked at the chairs as kind of division or departments, and they're doing their work, but when does it need to hit me? And then what's our process to make sure the speaker knows what's happening and what's going on, and when am I putting it up on the board for a vote? What am I pulling back? What do I need to get done right now? How am I rearranging the bills in order to accommodate that? So it's a lot of logistics. It's a lot of logistics.
Yes, so it's sort of like the manager of the assembly in a way.
In a way, which doesn't sound very like mid-management. Like it doesn't sound very powerful or glamorous, but it's like, yeah, in some ways it felt like that.
That totally makes sense. So shifting into another position that you took on during your years as an assemblywoman, you were a part of the Electoral College twice. So can you give us a little bit of an insight into how that process worked and what years you were a member of the Electoral College?
So I got to be a member of the Electoral College, and that is a process that is separate and apart from elected politics. That's all about party politics. I'm a Democrat. And so you have to attend your local county convention, your state convention, and if once you attend those two conventions, and old party roles, you could be one of the people that was selected to be an elector and identified as elector. The party selected those names, and then they submit them to the Secretary of State's office. They have a slate of electors from each of the two major parties. So from the Republicans and the Democrats, they'll have a slate of electors that are registered with the Secretary of State's office, and then not registered, but submitted to the Secretary of State's office. And then whichever party prevails after in the popular election, then those electors are summoned to Carson City, and you show up, and then you make your declaration for your candidate. And so I got to do that first with President Obama's first administration. And I was very nervous because when I showed up to do that, there's lots of press there. So you've got a lot of cameras in your face. And we had to handwrite his full name in there. And he suddenly had a crisis in confidence of, am I going to spell everything right? What if I put too many S's in Hussein? Like I wasn't sure, like I started overthinking it. And I was like, oh no, like I got stage right. And so, and then we held up our certificates and took pictures and all of that. So that was fun. Same thing for this was Hillary Clinton the ticket was Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Donald Trump prevailed in the national election, but in the state of Nevada, Hillary Clinton won. So as an elector was called down to the old assembly chambers. That's where the Secretary of State held it at that time. And same thing, you got a certificate. That one was a checking the box. That was easier. Thank you. So check the box for the candidate that you're selecting, and then presented your certificates, and then those were collected by the Secretary of State's office and mailed back to Washington, D.C. To the archivist, who takes possession of those, and then now we all know
how it works.
Gets sent over to Congress for them to certify the vote and all of that. So it's kind of cool.
So in the Electoral College in Nevada specifically, are those votes, those vote counts, are those held in different locations each election year, or is it every year in the old assembly chamber?
It's wherever the Secretary of State decides to do it. You don't need a ceremony to pull everyone together, but it's what our state does by tradition. So that, to my knowledge, I think it's typically always in Carson City. I might reserve myself to fact check that the statute doesn't require it to be in Carson City, and that maybe that's why it's in Carson City. But I'll fact check myself real quick. But yeah. Okay,
that's awesome. And then so moving forward into your current position, you now work with the Attorney General's office.
Yes.
And so what? First of all, what does the Attorney General do here in Nevada?
Everything.
And then what's your role in relation to that?
I'm very fortunate to have a great working relationship with Attorney General Ford. He served as the Senate Majority Leader in my first session, where I served as the Assembly Majority Leader. So we actually worked on legislation together at the time. A little bit of foreshadowing. It was legislation that would impact the Office of the Attorney General around sexual assault kits. There was a backlog of sexual assault kits. Media reporting showed that a number of different localities didn't have a way to track these kits and weren't processing them, and had a big backlog in processing them. And that was highly problematic, because these are the kits which are evidence collections from a person's body after sexual assault. So you can't prosecute that. You can't move forward with justice if that evidence is sitting around somewhere, not making its way through the prosecutorial system. So you really had to, it was really concerning to us that we had this problem in our own backyard. So we worked on that piece of legislation together. When I came on last year, he was just elected to a second term as the Attorney General, so 2 4-year terms. For a total of 8 terms. So he's about to hit his second year. This November will be year 2 of his second term. The Attorney General serves as the top law enforcement officer in the state of Nevada. They are essentially the law firm for the state. So they represent all state agencies, boards, and commissions. There's about 156 lawyers in the office, about as many support staff, total of about just 400 staff across 3 offices, Reno, Carson City, Las Vegas, and we have a couple of satellite offices. Great strength in consumer protection, a lot of jurisdiction to make sure consumers are protected, and you've seen AG Ford get a lot of big wins in terms of the going after the pharmaceutical companies and for their culpability in the opioid addiction, fentanyl addiction. That's out there. So big money coming in from settlements from that. Those dollars being given over to Health and Human Services to turn around and grant out to agencies to do abatement work to stop addiction in the state and to combat addiction in the state, opioid addiction in the state. There's just anything the state does, we're involved with in a lot of different ways. So I never know what's going to come across my desk every day. It's a little bit different every day.
Every day. Well, that's so exciting. Yeah. So how you started this position last year, you mentioned?
Correct. Yes. Came in. Yes.
Yes, last year.
Yeah. Almost 2 years in November, year and a half.
Oh, yes, almost 2 years, because when I interned, I think you were in that position in 2023, and now we're coming up on our next legislative session in just
I started at the end of November 2022.
Okay, so is that like sort of right after you termed out?
Yeah, okay, there was a few weeks
afterwards.
there.
Okay, wow.
Where I just kind of twiddled my thumbs and then went to work.
Waiting to see. And so also, along with that, this last legislative session in 2023, I did work on the Republicans versus Democrats basketball game with you.
You were such a help.
It was so much fun.
She made it wonderful.
So, are there any other fun traditions that you took part in your time as an assemblywoman or now with the Attorney General?
Yeah, there's a little bit of pomp and circumstance to the legislative process. It's a big institution with traditions. And so I think that there's some similarities there between that and the scholarship program.
Yes.
a little bit of pageant and parade, like opening day, very much
yes.
about celebration for, you know, people who have worked hard to get themselves elected and then, you know, take that seat as one of 63 people who can vote yes or no to change NRS and who can change the law in the state. So you see big opening ceremonies,
Yes.
lots of time with family, and having their friends and family on the floor to celebrate, lots of kids running around on the floor. So there's that. There's the Democrats versus Republicans, donkeys versus elephants basketball game, which is fun. And there's also a softball game, which is Senate versus Assembly. Then there's other things that happen in the building that are just about, you know, Nevada, we're a small state, and I always believe in the camaraderie that, you know, how a person votes is one aspect of who they are, but it's not the entirety of who they are. More than anything else, we've got things in common because we're Nevadans living under a sapphire blue sky that it has the most amazing sunsets in the world. We all know what it means to live in a desert where water is precious, right? We all love the land that we live in and think that we are, quite frankly, living in, you know, in God's country out here in Nevada. And that's a commonality that brings us all together. And I really tried to focus on I love those type of traditions where we come together because it keeps us focused on the fact that we are a community and we are so independent on each other, or dependent on each other. We're so intertwined.
Well, especially with Nevada session only happening every 2 years, I think that camaraderie and the ability to work together is so important here in Nevada because, again, it's 120 days that you have to pass legislation for the next 2 years, and you don't meet again until that next session, unless you have special session, of course. But so that camaraderie is really important here in our state.
It's very important.
And I know that's not the case for every single state because a lot of their legislatures can meet yearly, and so that's a little bit of a different side of Nevada politics that we have here. But Nevada is the only female-led majority legislature, and I believe you were majority leader during that time when we became when we earned that title. And so, do you have any advice for young women going into politics across Nevada and across the state or across the nation in general?
Yeah, do it. Run for office. The landscape has changed so much. There are so many different ways to be involved in your community. And I think the next level of that is taking on specific roles and jurisdictions, especially in elected capacity for leadership. There are hundreds of races to run for. I mean, outside of just the legislature, whether it's going to be, you know, a Senate seat or an assembly seat, you have county commissions, you have city councils, you have, you know, you've got within those local structures, you've got appointments to neighborhood boards, you've got library boards. You have so many different ways to be involved, and there's so much work that's happening. There's a need for people to be involved, like that ability, that desire and commitment to be involved in civic participation. It doesn't seem to be very popular right now. There's lots of boards and commissions that don't have enough people on them, so they can't meet because they can't get a quorum. But they do phenomenal work and they do important work, and you get to get in the weeds on some really cool subjects. So I would just say, just show up. I mean, half the battle on anything is showing up, right? Show up and then find something you like and dive in. There's a need, and there's absolutely opportunities for your own personal growth, your professional growth, but really about growing the community around you as well.
Well, in addition to that, sort of leaping off that, we are, again, in a very highly contested election year, and historically youth voters are the least likely to vote, and that's something that we're aiming to change here at Inform to Reform. So do you have a message for youth voters who might be a little confused or feeling lost or even fearful going into this election cycle?
I think more than anything, it's about being present. It's about being involved. Your voice is going to be heard. You have so many more ways for your voice to be heard than when I was, 18 and going to vote for the first time. And I really only had, the three big TV stations to refer to for news, and my grandparents, right? And now you guys have, I mean, I think one of the things that there's blessings and challenges with social media, obviously, but you can never not be informed. You've got to pick good quality information. You've got to vet your sources. You want truthful facts as established through trusted sources. But the world's your oyster in terms of information, and the world's your oyster in terms of communication. And so there's so much power that is out there to be influenced, and you can be an individual that just shows up to vote and does your own fact finding. I always say never vote alone. So if you're going to vote, roll deep with some friends, you know, make sure 4 or 5 of you go squad up to go vote, right? Voting should not be done alone. So, you know, take your friends with you. And if you're not familiar with every single race on your ballot, pick a few that you really want to research when you're a young voter and you're just starting out. And just know who those people are that you want to vote for. In Nevada, we're super accessible. Everyone who's on the ballot you can meet. You can ask them for coffee, and if they call up and they would say, yeah, I'll meet you, or come by and say hi. So you have a chance to meet all these people and figure out, do you like them? Are they your kind of people?
Well, awesome. Well, if you have anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, you can take the time to do that now. And then
I'll just say good luck to you. I'm very excited and so happy that you got the title. And
thank you.
I'm glad that you're engaging in forums like this.
Yes. Well, thank you guys all so much for tuning in, and thank you so much, Teresa, for being here with us today. Again, make sure you always stay tuned in to make sure you don't miss an interview or our podcast release. This is Karrina Ferris with the Informed to Reform podcast. See you guys next time.